Family banished, pregnant widow, and sister in blizzard. Unaware Alpha King would make her his. The wind howled across the jagged mountains like a creature alive, tearing at the thin cloak around Alara's shoulders. Her boots sank into the deep snow with every step, and each breath came as a white cloud that vanished instantly into the storm. She clutched her sister Lyra's hand, feeling the small trembling fingers in her own, and tried to steady her own racing heart. Alara! I'm cold! Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible over the roar of the wind. Her cheeks were streaked with tears and frost. Alara's lips pressed into a thin line. She was cold too, her hands numb, her feet heavy with exhaustion, but she couldn't let Lyra see her weakness. Not now. Not ever. Her family had cast them out without a second thought. A pregnant widow, unwanted and shamed, and her small sister, both left to the mercy of the mountains and the storm. Her father had turned away without a word, her mother trembling as she handed Lyra over like a package. The last image she carried of them was her mother's eyes, wet and distant, refusing to meet hers. I know, Lyra. I know, Alara said, forcing her voice steady. We have to keep moving. There's shelter just over the ridge. Lyra shivered violently but nodded, leaning on Alara for support. The snow was relentless, biting through layers of wool and furs. Each step was a battle, and Alara felt the weight of the life growing inside her, a small, fragile heartbeat that kept her moving despite the pain. She had to survive. For Lyra. For the child she carried. Hours, or maybe it was only minutes. She couldn't tell in the blinding white. Passed. The storm pressed on, thick and suffocating, erasing all sense of direction. Trees loomed like frozen sentinels, their limbs heavy with snow, and cliffs dropped off into white nothingness. Alara stumbled, catching herself on a gnarled branch, her heart pounding as fear coiled in her chest. Suddenly, a flash of movement in the corner of her eye made her stop. She spun, shielding Lyra behind her. "Who's there?" she shouted, though her voice was swallowed by the wind. The mountains answered only with silence and snow. Probably an animal, Lyra whispered, voice shaking. We should keep going. Alara nodded, though doubt gnawed at her. Something in the air felt different. Watching. Waiting. She shook the thought away, focusing on survival. One foot in front of the other. Breath in, breath out. Keep moving! By nightfall, their progress slowed to a crawl. The blizzard had grown wilder, and the ridge they had hoped to reach was nowhere in sight. Lyra's teeth chattered, and her small body was stiff with cold. Alara wrapped her arms around her sister, pressing her close, trying to share what little warmth she had left. We need to find a cave or something, Alara said, scanning the mountainside. There has to be shelter. But the storm offered no mercy. Snow whipped around them like shards of glass, and the ground beneath their feet became treacherous, a slippery layer of ice hiding deep crevices. Alara stumbled again, this time falling hard onto her knees. Pain shot through her back, a sharp reminder of her pregnancy. She groaned softly but forced herself upright. Lyra clutched her arm. I can't do this anymore, she whimpered. I'm so cold. Alara's heart ached at the words. She wanted to cry, to scream at the world for its cruelty, for her family's betrayal, for the life she carried. But there was no time. Only survival. Only the storm! We have to, she said firmly, her voice trembling but resolute. We're almost there. Just a little further. Hours blurred. Snow filled their hair and clothes, freezing their skin. Hunger gnawed at them both, though it was the cold that was the cruelest. Every step felt heavier, every breath harder. Alara's mind wavered between hope and despair, memories of her husband flashing through her mind, his laughter, his gentle hands, the warmth they had shared. She forced herself to focus on the present, on the sister beside her, on the child she carried. Then, just as her legs began to fail her completely, a faint glimmer in the storm caught her eye. At first she thought it was a trick of the snow, a shimmer in the swirling white, But as she squinted, the shape of a dark figure emerged from the blizzard, towering and silent, eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. Elara froze. Her heart raced. "Lyra, stay behind me," she whispered. The figure did not speak. It moved with a grace that was almost unnatural, gliding through the storm without leaving clear footprints. Its presence was commanding, almost royal, yet terrifying. The air around it seemed warmer somehow, though the wind still cut through their cloaks. Lyra clung to Elara's arm, shivering violently. What is that?" she stammered. I don't know," Elara admitted, her voice barely audible. Her instincts screamed danger, but another part of her, a part she refused to acknowledge, felt an impossible calm in the presence of this being. Before she could decide what to do, the figure stepped closer, and a deep, resonant voice cut through the wind. "You should not be here!" Elara's heart skipped. The voice was calm, but it carried authority and power. She could feel it vibrating through her chest, steadying her fear even as it warned her of danger. My family," she began, but the words felt hollow. The figure knelt slightly, lowering itself closer to the ground as if studying them. Its eyes, bright, piercing, impossible to ignore, locked onto her. "You are not prepared for these mountains. You will not survive the night." Elara's throat tightened. "We have no choice. They left us here." There was a pause, heavy and electric, as though the world itself held its breath. The figure reached forward, and a sudden warmth radiated from it, melting the edge of her fear. With a swift motion, it picked up Elara in its arms, ignoring her startled protests. "Put me down!" she shouted, though the wind stole her voice. "I can!" "You will not last," the figure said simply. The strength in its arms was impossible, yet careful, as though it would never harm her. Lyra's small voice trembled. "Sister," Elara's protest died in her throat. The figure moved through the blizzard with impossible speed, carrying them toward a distant shadow of light, a structure half hidden in the storm. Its walls were carved from the mountain itself, and a soft, warm glow spilled from within. By the time they reached the entrance, Elara was trembling from cold, exhaustion, and confusion. The figure gently set her down, brushing the snow from her cloak. She finally looked at it fully, the towering, regal presence, the glowing eyes that seemed both human and something beyond humanity. "Who are you?" she whispered, awe and fear mingling in her voice. The figure's eyes softened just slightly, though the authority remained. "I am Kale," it said, a single word heavy with meaning she could not yet understand. "You are under my protection now." Elara felt a mix of relief and dread. She had survived the blizzard, only to be taken into the hands of a being whose power and intent she could not read. Her mind raced with questions, but the warmth of the shelter, the beating of her own heart, and the quiet determination in Kale's presence left her strangely calm. Lyra clung to her, wide-eyed, staring at Kale. Are we safe?" she asked. Elara didn't answer immediately. She didn't know. The world outside was deadly and merciless, and this new protector, though awe-inspiring, was still unknown. Yet one truth settled in her heart like fire in the cold. For now, at least, they were alive. Kale guided them inside. The air was warm, scented with smoke and something faintly magical. Shadows flickered across the walls, and the structure felt alive, as if the mountain itself were sheltering them. Lyra's shivering slowed, and Elara could feel the life inside her moving, reminding her that survival was not yet impossible. Kale stood silently watching them. His presence filled the room, and Elara felt as though her very soul were being measured. There was power in him that both frightened and fascinated her, a force that could crush or protect, or perhaps something in between. As night deepened, Elara wrapped herself in furs, sitting close to Lyra by the fire. She stared into the flames, thinking of her family, the storm, and the mysterious figure who had saved her life. Fear and curiosity tangled inside her, and a part of her wondered what fate awaited them now. Outside, the wind howled, but inside the fire flickered softly, and Kale's eyes glowed faintly from the shadows. For the first time since the blizzard began, Elara allowed herself to rest, though unease lingered like a shadow in her heart. She did not yet know the truth of who Kale was, or why he had chosen to intervene. But she felt it, the unspoken weight of destiny pressing down upon her, subtle and unrelenting. And somewhere deep in the quiet, beneath the roar of the storm and the crackle of the fire, Elara felt the first stirrings of a question that would haunt her. Was she saved or claimed? The night stretched on, silent except for the whisper of snow against stone and the distant roar of the mountains. And in that silence a presence waited, watching, patient, unyielding. The morning sun struggled to pierce the thick veil of frost that clung to the mountains. Inside Kale's palace, carved into the stone cliffs, warmth and soft light filled the halls, but Elara felt anything but comfort. Her body ached from the blizzard, and her mind swirled with confusion, fear, and a strange curiosity about the figure who had saved her. Kal moved beside her silently, his presence as commanding in daylight as it had been in the storm. He said nothing, but his gaze seemed to measure her with a weight that made her shiver. She tried to keep her posture straight, though fatigue pulled at her limbs. Lyra walked close behind, still pale from the cold, clutching her sister's cloak for reassurance. Finally, Kale spoke, his voice low but firm. "You should rest. The storm has taken more from you than you know."
"I thank you," Elara replied softly, her voice hesitant.
"But I need to know. Why did you bring us here?" Kale's eyes, glowing faintly in the morning light, held a calm power. "Because you would not have survived alone. The mountains are merciless." "I am not merciful. I am necessary." Elara frowned, confused by the words. "Necessary? For what?" Kale paused at the entrance to a grand hall, carved from the mountain itself, the walls engraved with ancient symbols that seemed to shimmer faintly. "That is something you will understand in time," he said. "For now, you are under my protection." Elara felt a chill, not from the cold, but from the weight of his declaration. Protection from a being so powerful felt almost like a cage. She wanted to argue, to demand freedom, but fatigue and the knowledge that he had saved them silenced her. Lyra tugged at her hand. "Sister, should we trust him?" Elara swallowed, looking at the Alpha King, whose height and presence filled the room. He did not smile, did not soften, but something in the way he looked at them, careful, deliberate, made her hesitate.
I don't know yet," she said, gently guiding Lyra closer. "We have no choice for now."
Kale stepped aside, gesturing toward a smaller chamber heated by a fire. "Rest, eat, you will need your strength." The room was simple, yet elegant, carved from the mountain stone with smooth walls and a low fire that burned steadily. Lyra collapsed onto a blanket, shivering, while Elara sank onto a nearby bench, pressing her hands to her swollen belly. The warmth seeped into her bones, and for the first time in days, she could breathe without the blizzard pressing against her chest. Kale left them alone, but lingered in the doorway. His figure seemed larger than the room, casting a shadow that stretched across the floor. "Do not wander," he warned softly. "There are things in these lands that would see you harmed."
Elara met his gaze, searching for clues.
"Harmed? By whom? By forces that do not care for your life," he said simply, before retreating down the hall. Her heart beat faster. This was no ordinary man, no ordinary kingdom. The air in this palace, even in the safety of walls, carried a tension that made the skin on her arms prickle. She could feel power in Kale's presence, not just strength, but something ancient, something that belonged as much to the mountains as it did to him. Lyra stirred beside her. "Sister, do you think he's dangerous?" Elara looked down at her sister's worried face and sighed. "Maybe," she admitted. "But right now, he is our chance to survive. We can figure out the rest later." Hours passed. Elara explored the small chamber, touching the carved walls, tracing the shimmering symbols with her fingers. They pulsed faintly, almost alive. She could feel the magic in the stone, the old power that had built this place. Somehow Kale had not just saved them. He had brought them into a world she had never imagined. That night, hunger gnawed at her, and Lyra tugged at her sleeve. "Sister!"
Alara nodded and moved to the small hearth, arranging some dried food Kale had left in a basket. They ate quietly, the fire crackling, the palace silent around them except for the wind outside.
For a moment, they were just two sisters, alone and trying to survive, though the shadow of Kale's presence hung over them even in his absence. After the meal, Alara wrapped herself in furs, lying close to Lyra. Sleep was fitful, her mind replaying the storm, the mountains, the towering figure who had saved them. She remembered Kale's glowing eyes, the steady strength in his arms, and something in her chest tightened. Fear, yes, but also a strange pull, a connection she could not explain. Before she drifted fully into sleep, she heard a sound, a soft, deliberate step outside the door. She froze, straining to hear. The figure appeared in the doorway, silent, eyes glowing faintly in the firelight. "You are awake," he said, almost as if stating a fact. Alara sat up, heart pounding. I couldn't sleep. The storm, and everything." Kale stepped inside, moving closer but stopping a few feet away. "It is not the storm alone that keeps you awake," he said, his voice low, steady, carrying a weight she could feel in her chest. "There is fear. There is loss. There is the unknown." Alara's throat tightened. "I have never known kindness like this. Not since. She trailed off, thinking of her husband and the betrayal of her family. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. Kale's gaze softened slightly, though his presence remained commanding. "You have endured much," he said, "and you will endure more. But endurance is not weakness. It is strength. You carry life within you, and that alone gives you power you do not yet understand." Alara's breath caught. She had not thought of her child that way, as a source of strength, but the words resonated deep inside her. For the first time, she felt a small spark of hope. Kale studied her silently, then turned to leave. "Rest! Tomorrow you will begin to learn the ways of this place. There are rules here, and you must know them." Alara watched him leave, feeling the weight of his words. Rules, power, protection, danger. And yet she felt a strange, unexplainable pull toward the Alpha King who had saved them. The next morning, Kale returned with a servant, a silent figure who carried fresh water and food. Alara and Lyra ate quickly, the warmth of the palace easing their exhaustion. Then Kale motioned for them to follow. "You will see the lands," he said simply. "You will understand the reach of my rule and the dangers beyond these walls." They followed him through corridors carved into the stone, walls etched with glowing symbols and tapestries that told stories of old battles, ancient kings, and powerful magic. The world Kale ruled was beautiful and terrifying, a blend of human civilization and the raw power of the mountains. At the edge of a cliff, Kale stopped. Below, the forest stretched endlessly, white and silver in the frost. The wind swept up, biting, and Alara clutched her cloak. She felt small, insignificant, yet alive in a way the mountains had never allowed. "You see," Kale said, voice calm but full of authority, "this is not a land for the weak. You have survived a storm that would have ended many lives. That alone marks you as different." Alara frowned. "Different? I am only surviving." Kale's eyes held hers, unwavering. "Survival is the first step to power. And you will need power if you are to thrive here. You are carrying more than a child. You are carrying a choice, a future that will touch this land in ways you cannot yet know."
Ella felt a shiver run through her.
Was it the wind or the weight of his words?
Perhaps both, she realized with a mixture of fear and awe that her life had been irrevocably changed. She had been exiled, betrayed, and yet now she stood in a place of power she had never imagined, under the protection of a being whose presence both comforted and terrified her. Lyra clutched her hand. "Sister, what does he mean?" Elara squeezed her sister's fingers, glancing at Kale.
I don't know yet, she admitted, but we will learn, together. Kale's eyes lingered on her, intense and unreadable.
"Do not mistake my protection for kindness," he said. "It is neither favor nor charity."
It is necessary, and necessary does not always feel safe.
Elara swallowed. Safety was a fragile thing. She had known the absence of it all her life, but now, in the shadow of the Alpha King in a palace carved from stone and magic, she felt something new, a spark of courage, a flicker of hope, and a rising curiosity about the man who had saved her life and yet seemed beyond her reach. That night, as the fire flickered and Lyra slept, Elara gazed into the shadows where Kale lingered, watching. Questions churned in her mind, questions of trust, of fate, of the strange connection she felt to this being. And beneath it all, a quiet, unspoken fear that her life, her child, and even her heart were now bound to a power she could barely understand. The storm outside had passed, but a new storm had begun, one of power, desire, and destiny.
And in that storm, Elara understood that survival was only the beginning. The palace was quieter now than in the storm.
Snow still clung to the mountains outside, glittering in the pale light of dawn, but inside, the halls hummed with an ancient, steady rhythm, the pulse of Kale's realm. Elara walked beside Lyra, her steps careful, mindful of the child growing within her. She had begun to understand the rules of the palace, the hierarchy, and the presence of Kale himself, whose power was felt even in silence. Kale had not imposed harsh commands, but every glance, every movement, carried authority. Elara had learned to read the subtle shifts in his mood, the tension in his posture, and the way his eyes lingered on her for moments longer than necessary. She hated that she noticed, hated that her pulse quickened, yet a part of her could not deny it. She was drawn to him, though fear and pride kept her careful. Lyra tugged at her hand. "Sister, do you think he likes us?" Elara sighed, ruffling her sister's hair. "I don't know, Lyra. You don't survive storms like ours without earning respect, but—" She trailed off, glancing at the corridor where Kale had disappeared. Respect isn't always safe to notice. The day passed in lessons of survival, of the palace's strange, magical order, and of the lands beyond. Kale's guards, silent and imposing, moved around them like shadows, while servants delivered food, water, and clothing. Elara had learned to dress warmly in the furs provided, to move without stumbling on the icy floors, and to speak with careful politeness, never revealing too much of herself, never showing too much weakness. Yet beneath the surface of routine, Elara felt unease. Her nights were filled with dreams, memories of her husband, flashes of her family's betrayal, and visions of Kale watching her, intense and unreadable. Sometimes she would wake to find him standing in the shadows, silent, observing, as though he were reading her very thoughts. It was during one of these nights that she understood the depth of her fear and fascination. She had risen from the bed, unable to sleep, moving to the small balcony that overlooked the frozen forest below. The moonlight painted the snow silver, and the mountains seemed to hum with quiet energy. She felt the life inside her stir and pressed a hand to her belly, whispering softly, "I will survive for you," she murmured. Kale's voice answered from the doorway, calm and smooth as the wind outside. "You will endure more than survival, Elara." She turned sharply, startled. You were here." "I did not move from the shadows," he said. "You only felt me." Alara's pulse quickened. "Why? Why do you watch me?" Kale stepped closer, stopping a few feet away. His presence was overwhelming, commanding, yet careful. "Because you are bound to a path you do not yet see, and because you carry life that will touch this realm in ways you cannot yet imagine." Elara swallowed hard. I don't understand." "You will," Kale said simply. But understand this, the life you carry, your courage, and your choices will shape more than your own future. And that makes you remarkable.
The word struck her. She had never felt remarkable in her life. Her family had treated her as weak, as disposable. Yet here, in the presence of Kale, she was being recognized not for her beauty or her obedience, but for her survival, her courage, her will. Lyra stirred behind her, whispering, "Sister, is it safe to be near him?" Elora exhaled slowly. "For now, yes."
But be careful. Safety is not simple here.
Over the next days, Alara learned more about Kale's world. The palace was alive with power.
Some rooms shimmered with faint light as if the walls themselves held magic. Some corridors whispered faintly when no one was there. Strange creatures roamed the edges of the forests, guardians of the mountain, and the servants spoke of old curses, ancient battles, and the unyielding rules of the Alpha King. Kale guided her through the lessons with quiet authority. He taught her how to move carefully on ice, how to sense danger in the forest, and even how to read the subtle energies in the palace walls. But always, his presence was near. She could feel him in her peripheral vision, a shadow at the edge of her thoughts. One afternoon, they reached the edge of the forest. The snow was deep, almost blinding, and the wind cut like knives.
Kale stopped and turned to her. "You will learn more here than within these walls," he said. "The forest tests those who enter. Only those with courage survive its truths." Elara nodded, trying to steady her nerves. She had survived the mountains, survived her family's betrayal, but the forest was alive with mysteries and dangers she could barely imagine. "Do I
"Have to go in alone?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Kale shook his head.
I will be near, but not interfering.
You must face the forest on your own, guided by your instincts. It is the only way you will truly understand the power within you."
Her heart beat faster. Facing the forest alone felt terrifying, yet there was a thrill she could not deny. She was learning about herself, about the world, and about the strange, silent force that was Kale. She stepped into the snow, Kale watching silently from the edge. The forest seemed alive, the snow sparkling with faint energy. Every step was careful, measured. She felt her senses heighten, the crunch of snow underfoot, the distant howl of a creature, the subtle pulse of magic in the air. Suddenly a shadow darted across her path. Elara froze, instincts honed by the storm guiding her. The shadow paused, then retreated into the trees. She felt a flicker of fear, but also a thrill. She was learning to move with the world, to survive not only physically but mentally, navigating a realm she had never known. When she returned to the palace, Kale was waiting. His eyes met hers, intense and unreadable.
"You faced the forest," he said, "and you returned." "That is no small feat." Ilara's chest rose and fell, heart racing. It tested me."
I could feel something watching. Kale nodded.
"The forest sees all. It respects courage, even in the young and untested. You have shown strength, Elara, strength that is rare."
For the first time, Elara felt, noticed, not just as a survivor, not just as a widow, but as someone whose life and choices mattered. And yet, with that acknowledgement came a new tension, a reminder that Kale's power overshadowed her in every way, and that the connection forming between them was dangerous, unpredictable. That evening, Elara sat by the fire, Lyra asleep beside her, and let her thoughts wander. Memories of her family's betrayal pressed in. The cruel words, the cold dismissal, the moment they had cast her out into the storm. Pain rose in her chest, but she also felt a flicker of something new, a quiet determination.
She would not be weak. She would not be invisible.
Kale appeared without warning, standing in the doorway. His eyes glowed faintly in the firelight.
"You think too much of the past," he said softly. "The past is heavy. It can bind you or it can teach you. You must choose which it will be."
Elara met his gaze, feeling both challenged and understood.
And what about you? She asked. Do you carry no past?
Kale's jaw tightened. For a moment his calm facade faltered, and she glimpsed something deeper, a shadow of loss, of regret, of burdens she could not yet comprehend.
I carry many things, he admitted quietly, but they do not excuse me.
They only remind me of the choices I must make now. Ilara's heart ached at the glimpse of vulnerability, but she did not speak. She only nodded, understanding more than words could express. The night stretched on, quiet except for the fire and the distant wind. Ilara lay back, staring at the ceiling, thinking of Kale, of the forest, of the life growing inside her, and of the strange bond forming between them. A mixture of fear, respect, and an undeniable pull she could not ignore.
She did not know what the future held, only that the path forward would be filled with challenges, tests, and revelations. The forest had shown her part of her strength, but the palace and Kale would show her the rest. And she knew, deep in her heart, that facing him, learning from him, and surviving in this world would require every ounce of courage she possessed. As the fire dwindled to embers, a faint glow pulsed in the corner of the room, one of the palace's enchanted symbols, responding to the presence of new life, new courage, and new bonds. Ilara pressed a hand to her belly and whispered softly, I will not be afraid. I will not fail. From the shadows, Kale's eyes watched, unreadable, glowing with the weight of his power and the hint of a secret he would reveal only in time. And in that quiet, the first threads of trust, of tension, and of something deeper, something neither of them could yet name, began to weave between them. The storm outside had passed, but shadows remained, old curses, dangers lurking beyond the palace, and the mysteries of the forest, and Ilara understood, with a shiver and a thrill, that survival was only the beginning of a journey that would test her heart, her courage, and her very soul. The wind howled beyond the cliffs, but inside Kale's palace the warmth of the fire could not chase away the tension that gripped every stone. Ilara's heart pounded, not from fear alone, but from anticipation. Today she would face a challenge unlike any she had known, a test not only of courage but of trust, of choices, and of the bond that had grown between her and Kale. Lyra clung to her side, still small and fragile against the vastness of the palace, yet her eyes held a fierce determination.
Sister, are we ready? She asked softly.
Ilara took a deep breath, pressing a hand to her belly. We have to be, she said. For us, and for the life we carry. Kale emerged from the shadows, his figure commanding, his eyes glowing faintly as he regarded her. The threat is near, he said. The rivals have chosen this day to test our strength. You must walk into danger, but not unprepared. Ilara's pulse quickened. She had survived storms, exile, and the forest. But now she faced the unknown forces that sought to harm her and the realm. Yet in the presence of Kale, she felt a strange steadiness. His silent faith in her, unspoken yet undeniable, gave her courage. You'll guide me, she said, meeting his gaze. Kale nodded, a shadow of a smile crossing his features. Brief, almost imperceptible. I will protect you when necessary, but you must act from your own strength. That is the only way to survive. The palace doors opened and the wind swept in, biting cold and sharp. Ilara and Lyra stepped onto the cliffside terrace, the snow crunching underfoot, the forest stretching endlessly below. Beyond the trees, shadows moved, dark shapes among the white, signaling the approach of the rival faction Kale had warned of. Ilara felt fear rise, but also determination. She drew in a steadying breath and moved forward. The forest had taught her patience, observation, and courage. Now, she would put all that to the test. The first shadow emerged from the snow, a figure cloaked in gray, moving with purpose. Others followed, silent and calculated. Ilara's heart beat rapidly, but she did not falter. She remembered Kale's words. Strength is not only survival, strength is action. Strength is choice! Kale appeared at her side, silent but imposing. His presence radiated power, and the rivals hesitated, sensing his command. Yet they did not retreat.
The air crackled with tension, magic humming faintly from Kale and the palace itself. "Stay close," he whispered, his hand brushing hers briefly. The touch was light, yet the warmth lingered, a silent promise that they were not alone. Elara nodded, stepping forward. Her eyes scanned the shadows, seeking openings, sensing patterns. She moved with purpose, guiding Lyra behind her, using instincts honed in the forest. Each step, each movement, carried precision and thought. The rivals were skilled, but they were no match for the careful combination of courage, instinct, and Kale's quiet power radiating nearby. Suddenly, a figure lunged from the shadows, aiming for Lyra.
Elara acted without hesitation. She intercepted, pushing her sister out of harm's way and confronting the intruder herself. The clash was swift, physical, and precise. She felt her strength rise with every movement, a confidence she had not known before. Kale's voice rang softly in her ear. "Well done! Focus on control, not force. Let your instincts guide you."
Elara obeyed, feeling the life within her pulse, a quiet rhythm of courage and determination. Her child's presence reminded her that this was more than survival. It was purpose. She moved with grace and focus, defending herself and Lyra, turning fear into power. The rival faction faltered, sensing the combined strength of Kale and the sisters.
Shadows flickered, and the leader hesitated, caught between retreat and confrontation. Kale stepped forward, his presence radiating authority. "Leave!" he commanded, voice carrying across the terrace in the forest. The rivals froze, then slowly withdrew, disappearing into the trees. The wind howled in their retreat, a reminder that danger remained, but for now they were safe. Elara exhaled, her body trembling from the exertion and relief. Lyra clung to her, eyes wide, and whispered, "Sister, we did it!" "Yes," Elara said softly, pressing a hand to her belly. "We survived. We are stronger than we knew." Kale approached, studying her. His expression was unreadable, yet there was a glimmer of something rare. Admiration, perhaps, or respect. "You faced danger and did not falter. That is the mark of true strength. Not only survival, but courage guided by heart and mind."
Elara looked up at him, her chest tight.
I could not have done it without you."
Kale's gaze softened, and for the first time his authority seemed tempered by something gentler.
"You would have done more than survive. You would have learned, grown, and discovered the depth of your own power. I only guided." Her heart ached at the words. A mixture of gratitude, respect, and something more complicated, something tender and dangerous. She had come to see Kale not only as a protector, but as a being whose strength and vulnerability mirrored her own. As they returned to the palace, Lyra skipped ahead, excited and relieved. Elara walked beside Kale, their steps in quiet rhythm. The corridors of the palace seemed different now, less imposing, less distant. She felt a growing connection, a bond forged in danger, trust, and shared understanding. That night, Kale led Elara to a quiet chamber high in the palace, overlooking the snow-covered forest. The moonlight spilled across the walls, painting the room in silver and shadow.
He gestured for her to sit, then remained standing, watching her with intensity that made her pulse quicken.
"Elara," he said softly, "there is something you must know. The life you carry is not ordinary. It is tied to an ancient bond, a thread that connects my fate and this realm to yours. That is why I brought you here."
Elara's hands froze over her belly.
What do you mean?
Kale's eyes met hers, steady and unwavering.
"Long ago, a curse was placed on this land, one that could only be broken by courage, sacrifice, and the life of one born of strength. Your child is that life."
Her breath caught. Fear, awe, and responsibility pressed down on her.
You mean my child, can—" "Yes," Kale said quietly. "Your child can help heal this land, or, if neglected, the danger will grow. That is why your survival, your courage, and your choices matter more than you realize."
Elara pressed her hands to her belly, feeling the pulse of life, the rhythm of hope and responsibility.
Tears welled in her eyes, but they were not only of fear, they were of determination. She would not fail.
She would protect her child, Lyra, and herself. She would embrace the path fate had laid before her.
Cale stepped closer, lowering his voice. You have proven strength, resilience, and heart.
I trust you to make the right choices, but know this, you are not alone. I will stand by you, not as a king demanding obedience, but as someone who will protect, guide, and
support you. Elara's chest tightened. The bond between them, forged in survival, tension, and unspoken understanding, was now undeniable. She saw not just power in Cale, but vulnerability and a willingness to stand with her, not above her.
She began, unsure of the words. I don't know if I deserve your trust.
Cale knelt, bringing his eyes level with hers.
Deserve is not the word. You have earned it, not through obedience, not through fear, but through courage, choice, and heart. Elara's lips trembled.
She wanted to speak, to tell him everything, yet words seemed too small. Instead, she reached out, her hand brushing his. The contact was electric, a silent understanding passing between them. Two beings, scarred and tested, finding connection in the storm, in danger, and in shared destiny. Outside, the first light of dawn touched the mountains. The snow shimmered, and the wind softened. The storm had passed, not only the physical storm, but the storms of fear, exile, and uncertainty that had marked her life. Elara looked at Cale, and for the first time, she saw not just a protector, but an ally, a guide, and perhaps something more. Someone who would walk beside her in the trials to come. Lyra stirred behind her, yawning, unaware of the depth of conversation or the weight of destiny. Elara smiled softly, pressing a hand to her sister's head.
We've come a long way, she whispered, and the path is only beginning.
Cale's eyes glowed faintly, watching them both.
Yes, he said, voice quiet but firm. The path is only beginning. And together we will face whatever comes.
For the first time since exile, Elara felt a sense of hope, courage, and belonging. She had been cast out, betrayed, and tested, yet she stood here, alive, determined, and bound to a destiny that was both terrifying and beautiful. The storm outside had passed, leaving the mountains and forests glistening in new light. The future remained uncertain, but for Elara, Lyra, and Cale, it was a future they would face together. And in the quiet, she understood the truth that had been growing in her heart. Survival was only the beginning.
Love, trust, courage, and destiny awaited, and she would meet them all.
The palace stood silent, proud, and ancient, holding the weight of power, secrets, and the lives of those within.
And for the first time, Elara knew she belonged, not only in this place but in the story unfolding around her. A story of resilience, courage, and a bond that could withstand storms, shadow, and time itself.